Brothers and sisters, we are about to start the program with the recitation of the Holy Quran. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. سبح لله ما في السماوات وما في الأرض وهو العزيز الحكيم. يا أيها الذين آمنوا لم تقولون ما لا تفعلون كبر مقتا عند الله أن تقولوا ما لا تفعلون إن الله يحب الذين يقاتلون في سبيله صفا كأنهم بنيان مرصوص. وإذ قال موسى لقومه يا قوم لم تؤذونني وقد تعلمون أني رسول الله إليكم فلما زاغوا أزاغ الله قلوبهم والله لا يهدي القوم الفاسقين. وإذ قال عيسى ابن مريم يا بني إسرائيل إني رسول الله إليكم مصدقا لما بين يدي من التوراة ومبشرا برسول يأتي من بعده اسمه أحمد. فلما جاءهم بالبينات قالوا هذا سحر مبين. ومن أظلم ممن افترى على الله الكذب وهو يدعى إلى الإسلام والله لا يهدي القوم الظالمين. يريدون ليطفئوا نور الله بأفواههم والله متم نوره ولو كره الكافرون. هو الذي أرسل رسوله بالهدى ودين الحق ليظهره على الدين كله ولو كره المشركون. يا أيها الذين آمنوا هل أدلكم على تجارة تنجيكم من عذاب أليم. تؤمنون بالله ورسوله وتجاهدون في سبيل الله بأموالكم وأنفسكم ذلكم خير لكم إن كنتم تعلمون. يغفر لكم ذنوبكم ويدخلكم جنات تجري من تحتها الأنهار ومساكن طيبة في جنات عدن ذلك الفوز العظيم. وأخرى تحبونها نصر من الله وفتح قريب وبشر المؤمنين. يا أيها الذين آمنوا كونوا أنصار الله كما قال عيسى ابن مريم للحواريين من أنصاري إلى الله قال الحواريون نحن أنصار الله. فآمنت طائفة من بني إسرائيل وكفرت طائفة فأيدنا الذين آمنوا على عدوهم فأصبحوا ظاهرين. صدق الله العلي العظيم.
Brothers and sisters, we are now very fortunate to welcome Muhammad Ali, who will be reciting to us as we commemorate the death anniversary of Lady Fatimah alayhi salam. Please welcome wa salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad.
صلوات على محمد وآل محمد. يا زهرا يا زهرا يا زهرا يا زهرا. Oh, the purest, pious Lady of Light, an example of dignity and might. How can we not shed a tear for you when we see the pain that you went through? Ya Zahra, Ya Zahra, Ya Zahra, Ya Zahra. From a young age you faced tyranny, felt great pain, you lost your baby, suffered sorrow, your father left you. Yet you stayed strong, we wish to be like you, Ya Zahra, Ya Zahra, Ya Zahra, Ya Zahra. By Mawla's side, after Rasulullah, you stood up to the thugs of Medina. When the door came crushing down on you, Mohsin taken cruelly away from you. Ya Zahra, Ya Zahra, Ya Zahra, Ya Zahra. Never been seen outside without your God. Even in death, you show the true hijab. But your daughters unveiled for all to see, also uncovered, your sons had lost body. Zahra, Ya Zahra, Ya Zahra, Ya Zahra. صلوات على محمد وآل محمد.
اللهم صل على محمد wa ala Muhammad. Thank you very much, Muhammad, for that beautiful recitation. Brothers and sisters, today we are very fortunate to welcome Brother Yusuf Al-Salhi, who's going to be speaking to us about Fatima al-Zahra alayhi salam, the role model of modesty. Please welcome us, salawat ala Muhammad wa ala
Muhammad. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you perfectly. So Brother Al-Salhi is a British hawza student who has studied in Qum since 2014. He specialises in Fiqh, jurisprudence, Usul, Islamic legal theory, Hadith, the science of Rejal and Diraya, Islamic philosophy, including logic, Polemics, and Qur'anic sciences. He's been teaching nearly all of these subjects for the last 3, I think maybe now 4 years, both in Qum and London, in English and in Arabic. Salawat ala Muhammad.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل Muhammad. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Today, inshallah, we're going to be speaking about Fatima al-Zahra alayhi salam and her modesty, like that specific characteristic. So, without a doubt, Fatima alayhi salam is a role model for Muslim women specifically and for humanity in general, like how the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is a role model for men specifically and humanity in general. In every personality, when we want to study a personality, there's two dimensions to that personality. Any person. The first dimension is the characteristics of that person. So that person being kind, being modest, being humble, pious, brave. All of these are characteristics that are in a person. And there's two ways to know these characteristics. The first way is by direct experience, first-hand experience. So you see him act in a specific way, you look at these collective acts, you put them together, and then you draw the conclusion of him being brave, or of him being kind, or of him being humble. That's the first way to get to know this specific characteristic. The second way is you take it through narrations of people that have seen him, people that have had first-hand experience. These are the two ways of knowing characteristics of a person, of a specific person. The second dimension to a personality is the essence of that person. So, and what I mean by essence in this context is the process of his creation. Was he made of light? Was he made of clay? Was he made of whatever it may be? Now, these things and these conclusions that we reach as in knowing the essence of that person, there's no first-hand experience in them. Like, we're not going to experience him being created from light or her being created from light. We're never going to know these things. We're going to take them from the narrations. That's the only way for us to know the specific characteristic or the essence of that person. And today I'm not going to be speaking about the second dimension of Fatima al-Zahra alayhi salam. I'm going to be speaking about her characteristics. And I've chosen one specific characteristic, which is modesty. Modesty is what we're going to be talking about today. So today, inshallah, we're going to be speaking about three things. First of all, we're going to give a brief history of Fatima al-Zahra alayhi salam. The second thing is we're going to bring a narration about her modesty. And the third thing that we're going to be speaking about is general teachings that we need to bear in mind in our community. Fiqh teachings, jurisprudential. So Fatima al-Zahra alayhi salam, the most extensive work that we've seen on Fatima al-Zahra alayhi salam, like written work, at least as far as my knowledge reaches, is Al-Mawsu'at Al-Kubra an Fatima al-Zahra. That's a 25-volume work written by Ismail Ansari Zinjani. I think that's the most extensive book on Fatima al-Zahra. So he's dedicated the whole book just on the birth of Fatima alayhi salam. So as for the birth of Fatima alayhi salam, there are around 15 different opinions. That's what he mentions, and he takes them from around 222 sources. So this tells us something. This tells us that there are certain things in history that we can never know by certain. And it's wrong to place that certainty in these things. You can't be certain about when a person is born. And that's the case with the rest of the Imam salam. The Prophet himself, we don't know exactly when he was born. Yes, we have narrations that say that he was born in this day or that specific time, but you can never know these things for certain. And I think it's wrong to expect us to know these things by certain. And it's like some people, if you tell them that this is not certain, he feels that his belief has been shook. No, it's not the case. There are certain things that you shouldn't find certainty in. And that's the case, as I said, with the rest of the Imam. So there's 15 different opinions on when Fatima al-Zahra alayhi salam was born. The most common opinion is that she was born 5 years after the Bi'tha of the Prophet, like 5 years after the Prophet being an actual Prophet. So we can say that he was 45 years old when he had her. The second most common opinion is that she was born 5 years before Al-Bi'tha. So that's a 10-year gap between the first opinion and the second opinion. So these are the two common opinions. So when she died, according to the first opinion, she died at the age of 18, and to the second, according to the second opinion, she died at the age of 28. Now, as for her death, when did she die? There's 21 different opinions from approximately 600 different sources. As I said, it's not my work. This work I've taken literally from the book Al-Mawsu' Al-Kubra and Fatima Al-Zahra. You can find it in the chapters of the book. So there are 21 different opinions. The most common opinion is that she died 11 al-Hijrah, the same year as the Prophet, 6 months after the Prophet was dead. And the Prophet died, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, at around 11th al-Hijrah, Rabi' al-Awwal. And Fatima al-Zahra alayhi salam, she died at 28th of Sha'ban, 11 al-Hijrah. That's the most common opinion. Now, there are other opinions that she died 40 days after the death of the Prophet. As I said, there's 21 different opinions on this topic. That's about it regarding her death. Now we're going to come to the narration. So I've chosen this specific narration to address her modesty and how she understood it. And this narration, I think it has a lot of meaning into it. The narration goes as follows: إن فاطمة بنت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم استأذن عليها أعمى فحجبت. So a blind man wanted to take permission to see her or to visit her or to come in the house. Like, it's not clear what he wanted to do, but he took permission from her. فقال لها النبي لما حجبت. So she took permission. Oh, the person took permission from Zahra alayhi salam, and Zahra alayhi salam denied him that permission. So she didn't accept. She prevented him from coming in. So the Prophet told her, لما حجبتيه? Why did you prevent him from coming? وهو لا يراكِ. So this person was blind. So why have you prevented him from coming in, and he's a blind man? فقالت, so she responded, إن لم يكن يراني فأنا أراه وهو يشم الريح. Oh, the Prophet, if he can't see me, I can see him. Okay? And he also smells the scent. So the Prophet then said, فقال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم أشهد أنك بضعة مني. I bear witness that you are a part of me. Now, according to the fiqh teachings, no alim, no marji', or like the main scholars, they didn't understand that, or they didn't bring the teaching of if a blind man wants to see a woman, let's say not wearing her hijab, is he allowed to see her? Yes, he is allowed to see her because he's not actually seeing anything. So can a woman take off her hijab in front of a blind man? Yes, she can take off her hijab in front of a blind man. So that's not what's understood from the ruwayah. But what we can understand from the ruwayah is the morale, is that Zahra alayhi salam has this consciousness that if I want to do an action, you know, this action might have some certain consequences that are inevitable. And that's the consciousness that she has, like, she's been brought up on, and she's actually developed this consciousness. And this is what we should be targeting. And this is what I want to talk about today when it comes to modesty. It's that consciousness of being responsible of your actions. Every action has a consequence. And a lot of people say that, okay, if my intentions are good, then that's about it. No, it's not about it, because certain actions have bad consequences even if you didn't intend it. And Zahra alayhi salam is trying to point to this very, very like issue, that there are certain, like, yes, he's not going to see me, but you know, he might smell me. So she's saying that, yes, I don't have any intentions, there's no bad intentions over here, but there might be something that could put me in a weak position or in a vulnerable position that I want to take myself out of. So this is a consciousness that people need to develop, and this is what we can understand from this ruwayah. Now, I want to mention general teachings about modesty and ahkam shari'iyya around modesty. But before we speak about these ahkam, I just want to speak about a generic intro about al-ahkam al-shari'iyya. There are certain ahkam we call ta'abbudi. Ta'abbudi meaning that when you do it, you do not actually know why you're doing it. So, for example, Salatul Dhuhr. namaz al-dhuhr? Why is it 4 rakat? We don't know. You can reason all day and say, well, okay, the Prophet said this, he brought an explanation, but we're never going to know actually why it was like that. Or why is at-tawaf hawl al-Kaaba? So you go in circles around the Kaaba. Why is it 7 times, not 8? Someone says, if I do it 8 times, I'm going to feel more closer to God. Okay, if someone says that, well, what's the response? Well, there are certain things in Islam we do not know why. We know that the Prophet said it, and we're just going to stick to what the Prophet said. We're not going to explain and bring reasoning behind it, and that can be applied in a lot of different ahkam sharia. A lot of different teachings are actually like that. We don't know the real reason behind it. Yes, nowadays maybe science has developed. It might be able to give us, explanations, but these explanations are not for sure as well. And that's why we shouldn't take them for certain. We should stick to, as I said before, there's certain things in Islam that are certain, let's stick to it. The things that are not certain, let's accept that it's not certain, and let's embrace that culture. We do not have to have an answer for every detail in Islam. Yes, there are certain things, for example, al-aqidah, that when it comes to belief, the creed, yes, you should rationalize these things. You should come to a conclusion why you believe in the Prophet, why do you believe in the Imams. That has to be rationalized. But other things, no, that's not the case with especially the ahkam al-fiqhiyya. A lot of ahkam fiqhiyya, you'd never know the reasoning behind it. So that's the first group of ahkam, at-ta'abbud, things that you take for granted and there's no real reasoning behind it. And we know that it's just a form of getting closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but we don't know why it's 4 and not 5 rakat. We don't know why Salat al-Fajr is only 2 rakat, not 3. And then you have the other group of ahkam, which is the ahkam that depend on the urf. Now, there's a really important term that needs to be discussed today, which is al-urf. So the literal meaning of urf, it means what's known. Okay? So what's known or common amongst a specific group. As you can see from that definition, it's very subjective. So a group living in the UK, something might be very clear to them, but someone who's living, or a group that's living in the Middle East or Asia or Africa, wherever it may be, it's not clear for them, right? So what we can say that urf is very subjective, okay? It's very subjective. It really depends on where, where's your location and what group you are. And why is it very subjective? Because the urf is influenced by different factors that are subjective. So the urf, what's considered to be known, and it's like an understanding that someone develops depending on where he lives, right? And who he surrounds himself, with. It's influenced by culture, and culture is very relative. It's very subjective. Someone coming from an Indian background is influenced by the Indian culture. Someone's come from an Arab background is influenced by the Arab culture. And even amongst Arabs themselves, there's a lot of different cultures. There are some cultures that are very traditional, and there are some cultures that are very open. So it's a very subjective thing. That's one thing that influences the urf, what's considered to be known amongst the group. Another thing is tradition. So you have a tradition that's subjective as well. That influences your understanding of urf, what's known for a specific group. Other things like music. Music does influence a culture. As we can see, like in the UK, clearly music has a big influence on our culture, especially on the youth. It can actually build a whole understanding in the youth that he desires to be a specific person in the future because of the type of music that he's listening to. So clearly, what's considered to be known is influenced by music. Also art, and another thing is religious practices. And this is what you see in religious groups, or religious a'raf, religious cultures. If you see the religious cultures, you can see they're really influenced by certain actions that they have been practiced. So if you go to Najaf, for example, you're going to see it to be more preserved because it's influenced by previous people acting upon their religion consistently. That builds an understanding of what's considered to be known in the people's mind that live in that specific region and in that specific area. So there are certain ahkam that really depend on the urf. So if we say that some of the ahkam are changing, it's not really changing. What's changing is what it's depending on. Like, for example, I'm going to give clear examples on things that are influenced by the urf. So the definition of music, we can say it's not a consensus amongst scholars that music is haram, but definitely the vast majority do believe that music is haram. And the ones that do believe that music is haram, if you come to ask them what's the definition of music, they're going to give you like a term that's used. And for example, say Sistani uses this term. He said the forbidden music is the music that is suitable for entertainment and amusement gatherings. Now, this definition is very subjective as well. Suitable for entertainment and amusement gatherings. Now that's very relative. Something that's considered to be an amusement gathering in a culture, and in this part of in this region, is different than what's considered to be entertainment and amusement gathering in a different culture. So clearly, this example over here, it's not that the hukum is changing. The hukum is haram. Music is haram. But what's the definition of that music? So even in logic, they bring about a predicate and the subject. So you have the subject that you bring the predicate and you put it on it. So if you say, let's say, the water is hot, the subject is the water and the hot is the predicate. It's basically what you're explaining to be on that subject. And the same applies over here. Music is the subject and haram is the hukum. It's actually the predicate. So if music is haram, what we're trying to say over here, that is not changing. Music is haram. But what's changing is our understanding of the subject itself, the music. What's considered to be music? It's really defined by the culture, by the urf, what's considered to be known, that you are surrounded by. That's one example. Another example is dress code and like what's considered to be modest. Now, this is why, like I explained all of this, we're trying to understand what's considered to be modest. Clearly, modesty is understood by the urf. So being modest is something that is, let's say, obligatory. Certain sides of modesty is definitely obligatory amongst Muslims. But what's considered to be modesty is really different. It's really challenging to pinpoint and say this is modesty and there's no other form of modesty. No, it doesn't work like that. It's actually subjective in the sense that it relies on the urf, what's considered to be known. So a certain dress code in the Middle East is considered to be, let's say, wrong, and it's not modest. But if you bring that dress code in the UK, it's considered to be modest. There's nothing wrong with it. And that's why, is the ahkam changing? No, it's not changing. What's haram is haram and what's halal is halal. But what's changing is the urf, where the ahkam are applied. And if it's haram over there, it doesn't necessarily mean it's haram over here, because the urf over there is different than the urf over here. Now we want to speak about modesty, but in a more, like, we want to bring a couple of ahkam on what's considered to be modesty. I don't want to go into the nitty-gritty detail of the different ahkam of modesty. That's not what I want to do. I want to speak about general teachings of Islam. Islam has general teachings. These general teachings can be applied in different forms, but they are general teachings that we can stick to. As I said, it can be applied in different ways. It can be understood in different ways as well. But the general concept is the same. The first thing I think, like, if we want to be more modest, if we want to embrace the culture of being modest, the first thing is that we need to acknowledge one another. Like, as a community, we need to accept one another. And what I mean by that is, I don't know, I've seen this in certain communities. Maybe it's not that common over here. It's more common maybe back home. Some men treat women like they don't even exist. Okay, and that's just wrong. They're part of the community. Like, they're not a wall. They're not a wall just surrounding the room. They're actually people that have feelings that are like us. So acknowledging one another is the first step to actually accept the idea of modesty, because some people understand modesty in a way that it just excludes women from interacting with the community. And we all know that a community develops as a whole. A community cannot develop with just the men being productive and the woman not being productive. It doesn't work like that. As humanity, like, we've seen history time and time again, it's proven the same idea that we develop as a whole and we don't develop individually. So the first thing, as I said, is acknowledging one another. The second thing which is really important, and I think we need to pay like a lot of attention on, and we need to like accept this as well. There are certain lustful actions. As I said, this might differ from one place to another, from one region to another. And what I mean by lustful actions is that clearly Islam prohibits you from acting upon a lust that you have that is not regulated. So let's say if you want to speak to a woman and you're getting lust from what you're doing right now, you're getting this feeling, you're getting this urge, and vice versa. If the woman is getting that urge, clearly there's something wrong in that because it's not regulated and it's not really ending in the right way, at least the majority of the times. Now, someone might say, if I want to approach a woman and if I want to marry a woman right now, and the woman can say the same, if I want to marry a man, I need to speak to him, right? And some of the feelings are we can't really control. While I'm speaking to the person, there are certain feelings that I might develop that I can't control. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that because that's not something you can control. There are feelings that you can control, and there are certain feelings that you can't control. Especially that you're entering, like you're approaching this specific issue in the right way. You want to marry that person, and she wants to marry you. So clearly the direction is right. There might be some feelings that you develop between like before getting the nikah, like that phase. There might be certain feelings that are not really good, but you can't control that, and that's just the process that you have to go through. That's as I said, it's uncontrollable, and you're going towards the right direction, so there's nothing wrong with that. And the second thing is the second thing is so that's what I mean by lustful actions. So when you want to approach a specific occasion, a situation, if you want to approach a specific situation, you should be approaching it in a way that you're heading towards the right direction and you know what you want to do. And whatever action is based on lust that is not regulated and that's forbidden, that's just wrong. That's something that you try to avoid. And I'm not saying it's easy, but I'm definitely saying that this is a general understanding of Islam. Clearly, Islam doesn't want us to follow our lust. That is not regulated, and that's not in the right. It's not in the right atmosphere. That's another thing that I wanted to mention regarding modesty and how to be modest. The other thing is, as I mentioned earlier, things that happen without any bad intention. So this applies to both men and women. So if you want to speak to, let's say, if you're a man, you want to speak to a woman, and if a woman wants to speak to a man, it's really important to not come across as a naive, jokey person, because that can be misunderstood in a lot of different ways. That can lead to a lot of different things. As I said earlier, when Fatima Zahra alayhi salam, she said that, yes, I can't see him, but he might smell me. So she, as I said, she's not speaking about her intentions no more. She's speaking about what could be misunderstood. And that's the same applies over here. If you come across as naive or jokey, a lot, like I'm speaking, I'll give a situation or a scenario where, let's say, a woman is coming across as very jokey and naive as well. So a lot of men would misunderstand that, or some men would misunderstand that. And if they misunderstand that, they'll start to abuse the situation. They start to get or take advantage of the situation, and it can lead, like they can see that to be an opportunity and they can take it to a different direction. So that's why I think in general, the way you carry yourself, the impression that you give to the person in front of you should be very well like studied. Like you shouldn't give that impression if it's a bad impression, and you should always work on developing a specific attitude and a specific behavior where others will get the right impression if they want to approach you. They don't take you for a joke, or they don't abuse the situation or the vulnerability that you might put yourself in. That's another general understanding, or you can say from the Ahkam al-Fiqhiyya, that we can understand. Okay, is you don't want to, and as I said, this is not intended. Sometimes you might joke and you don't mean anything, but the person in front of you understands it in a different way, and that's why I'm saying it's the way you carry yourself. It's the impression that you give. Another thing that we can see in the riwayat is the idea of a man sitting alone with a woman. Now, maybe that can be like the different forms that we can see that in is a lot right now. For example, and maybe our understanding of sitting alone is different right now. Maybe it can be in a WhatsApp chat, that's sitting alone. It can be in a dating site, that's sitting alone. So the manifestation of the different forms are ever evolving. Like they're always evolving, they're always changing, and the same concept can be applied in all of these different scenarios. So clearly, this concept of just sitting alone, and we're speaking about like maybe a young man or a young woman or someone who, like, a spark, like a potential spark might take place, like in a situation where a potential spark might take place. Avoiding such situations is really important as well. Like some scholars said that al-khalwa, they call it al-khalwa fil ajnabiyya. Some scholars said it's haram mutlaqan. Okay, yes, Sistani doesn't say that, but haram mutlaqan, meaning that just a man sitting with a woman alone, even if nothing happens, is haram. A man sitting with a woman who's not his sister, not his wife, not a mahram, basically, it's considered to be haram mutlaqan. Some scholars, like Sistani, he says that it's only haram if it's going to lead to something that's haram. So if it leads to the man approaching the woman in an unrespectful way, it's haram, or vice versa, basically. So this concept of sitting alone with a woman needs to be, let's say, taken more seriously. We can see this in unis, possibly. We can see maybe in, like, I don't know, sitting alone. If you consider the coffee shop sitting alone, I mean, they feel alone. Now, that might not really apply that they're sitting alone, but they feel alone. That, as I said, the general concept that I'm trying to give over here, I'm not trying to be literal with what I'm saying. I'm trying to say that there's an understanding that we need to develop. There's we have these ruwayat that say wa'idun min nafsi, so he has this self disciplinary that he starts to develop based on Islam. So sitting alone, don't take the literal meaning, take the understanding behind it. The idea that you put yourself in a vulnerability where certain things might escalate in the wrong direction. Yeah, so these are the four ahkam that I wanted to speak about. And yeah, I think that's about it for today. Thank you very much for listening. I don't know if I finished early, but I think that's all I have for today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Yusuf. We have some time for questions, if that's okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
We haven't received any questions on the YouTube chat, but we've had some questions coming through. So one of the questions is just about the historical side of things. So in terms of, you mentioned the difference in dates between Prophet Fatima being born, whether it was 5 years before or 5 years after, and so, just a question about how there's such significant discrepancy around the age, around the birth date, and such an important aspect of her life, and such an important personality. Why there's such a big difference? Why there's such a big difference in the historical data from the two?
Yeah, the way I would respond to that is to say that people, it doesn't really, like, maybe I'm speaking about people at them times. It's not really clear that they gave any significance to the birth of a specific person, and especially if they didn't know that he's going to be this person. If they didn't know that the Prophet Muhammad is actually going to be a prophet, why would they give that significance of knowing when he, let's say, when he was born? Yes, you can argue that, okay, after he became a prophet, why have they disagreed on when he died? Yeah, that would be a valid question. And the way I would answer that is that writing these things at that time was really problematic, and especially that you have some ruwayat that say that we shouldn't write, you shouldn't write the hadith, and all of these ruwayat that came after the death of the Prophet. That definitely had an influence on the way they write the data, and then how the data is preserved, and hence why you find a lot of differences amongst scholars on when the Prophet died, or when Fatima Zahra alayhi salam died. And then you have, let's say, historians that come 200-300 years after the death of that person, and they do more research, and then they say there's a lot of discrepancy over here, there's a lot of let's say mistakes over here, and he comes up with a third theory, and then it's just ever evolving. It's always changing, and that's why some of the opinions came very late. Some opinions came early, and some opinions came late. But I think the idea, and I think this question, if we like make it more broad to ask and to say, like, what about other cultures? Other cultures, have they got that figured out, or is that considered to be uncertain as well? Well, I understand other cultures when it comes to history, it's uncertain as well. They don't know the exact date, and that's just something. If you see it repeating itself in different cultures, you start to understand that that's just how humans function. Maybe nowadays it's different because everything's recorded in a specific way that mistakes are highly unlikely. Maybe this technology hasn't been developed back then. Yeah.
I guess it's just around the then. I mean, so certain social aspects which you mentioned, for example, can be related to age, and that then causes some difficulties when discussing with other people about what's happened. And I guess that's why, in terms of birth, 10 years would make a significant difference.
Definitely, yeah. I mean, that's a huge difference. 10 years. You can imagine how many things happened in these 10 years that, like, why isn't it clear? Yeah, I don't have a clear answer to that, to be honest. Like, that's 10 years. Yeah.
Thank you. So someone has posted on YouTube. Just can you recap the 4 points?
Yeah, sure. I'll recap them. So basically, the first thing I said is acknowledging one another. A man acknowledging the woman, and the woman acknowledging the man, and treating one another with respect and embracing them as part of the community. The second one is lustful actions. If there's any action that's coming out of lust, it's good to prevent it. And Islam embraces the culture of preventing yourself from acting upon your lust. The third point is when you talk to a man, or when a woman talks to when a woman talks to a man, or when a man talks to a woman, don't come across as naive or jokey or very, like, not straightforward, because people look at that. A lot of people understand that to be vulnerabilities where they can take advantage of. And the fourth thing is al-khalwa bil-ajnabiyya, so a man sitting alone with woman in all its different forms, whether it's in a chat, whether it's in a physical space. And yeah, these are the 4 points.
Thank you very much. I don't think we have any more questions, so that's okay. Well, and thank you very much, Yusuf.
Thank you. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Brothers and sisters, let you know about next week's program. Next week, Friday, 14th January, we will be welcoming Professor Jonas Otterbeck, who's a professor of Islamic studies. Who'll be talking about his most recent book, which will be called "The Awakening of Islamic Pop Music," and his current research on creativity in Islam. It'll definitely be an interesting talk, so please do join us on next Friday at 8:15. Muhammad Salawat.